This video, basically, what I want to do is I would like to discuss an article by Kai Nielsen, and I'm reading out of this anthology, Ethical Theory, which is edited by Pojman, and there's lots of good stuff in here. And in this video, I just want to discuss that. It has a whole section on consequentialism and such, and it's got Mill in it. It's got JJC Smart, I think, and Kai Nielsen, basically, he has an article in here called Against Moral Conservatism. Moral conservatism is similar to like moral absolutism or deontology. Conservatism is basically holding that there's certain obligations or principles that one must adhere to, which in whatever they're doing, it's ascribing moral worth to a couple certain principles. For instance, Kant, his categorical imperative, that's basically ascribing all moral worth to those three things. I can't remember them very well, but that's doing that, and on that you could never lie, no matter what the circumstances are. Another deontological moral theorist would be W.D. Ross, but basically it's just that you're ascribing moral worth to a couple absolute principles which you always have to adhere to. There's the deontological kind, there's the Kantian kind, there's various different kinds of kinds, or different kinds, and you also have theistic versions where the religious belief sets up some moral obligations that must be adhered to. Kai Nielsen argues for a moral consequentialism, or pretty much is utilitarianism. And what that is, it's ascribing moral worth to actions based on the consequences that will follow from those. It's, and basically, the consequential theories based on utility or desire and happiness say that that there's more worth in doing things that maximizes your happiness, it maximizes your pleasure, or it maximizes the best thing for everyone. So you want to act based upon what will increase as much as possible positive value states, or just good circumstances for everyone. Now I'm not of this theory. I do not believe in it, nor am I a moral conservative or a moral absolutist. I kind of am in the virtue theory kind of camp, but basically what he does in here is he gives two different cases. Now he discusses people like G.M. Anscombe, as well as Alan Donegan, and he talks about moral a priori and all that, and lots of stuff like that, which I will not discuss here, but I will discuss his main point as to because basically he's talking about how certain cases can show that that consequentialism is wrong based on what the consequences would be, and it would show the action to be monstrous or whatever. He gives two cases here, which and I think that if you show the cases, cases that are different, that are most different, it shows the problems with certain moral principles. And basically what he does is he gives those two things, and he shows, I think, very well that given a moral conservatism or a moral absolutism, which has a few principles that you must always adhere to, and there's no circumstance at all whatsoever in which you can abandon that. Any kind of thing that has that is wrong because of this. It's not good because he's trying to create a case, and he does, where adhering to a certain moral obligation or duty would end up with a more monstrous case or a more monstrous result than would otherwise. And he says that not only should moral worth be ascribed to the actions that produce the best consequences, but also that the actions that are to be picked out as ones that do so are like a count of common sense or a moral reasonableness, as where you look at things and pick the action which leads to the consequence which is the best for everyone and leads to the least amount of unhappiness. So I'm just going to read the two cases that he gives and explain very briefly what he says. Now, I think this is reprinted from the journal called Ethics, number 82 from 1972. So I would think that if you have access to JSTOR, that you'd probably get it. But this is the book that it comes in. And I purchased this at a half-price bookstore, and if you go to a place like that, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. Okay, so he gives he gives the case of the. I'm going to go with the second one first. The magistrate and the threatening mob. A magistrate or judge is faced with a very real threat from a large and uncontrollable mob of rioters demanding a culprit for her crime. Unless the criminal is produced, properly tried, and executed, they will take their own bloody revenge on a much smaller and quite vulnerable section of the community. The judge knows that the real culprit is unknown, and the authorities do not even have a good clue as to who he may be. But he also knows that there is within easy reach a disreputable, thoroughly disliked, and useless man who, though innocent, could easily be blamed, so that the mob would be quite convinced that he was guilty and would be pacified if he were promptly executed. Recognizing that he can prevent the occurrence of extensive carnage only by framing some innocent person, the magistrate has him framed, goes through the mockery of a trial, and has him executed. Most of us regard such a framing and execution of such a man in such circumstances as morally unacceptable, as totally unacceptable. There are some who would say that it is categorically wrong, morally inexcusable, whatever these circumstances. So he has two options here. You could take more time to find the person who actually committed the crime, which could lead to more people dying or more people being going through a lot more some really horrible things because of this horrible rioting mob. If the magistrate were a tough-minded but morally conscious consequentialist, he could still, on a straightforward consequentialist grounds, refuse to frame and execute the innocent man, even knowing that this would unleash the mob and cause much suffering and many deaths. The rationale for his particular moral stand would be that by so framing and then executing such an innocent man, he would, in the long run, cause still more suffering through the resultant corrupting effect and the institution of justice. So in like they had this person who did not do this. Is nobody likes him. He's kind of is a criminal. And if we could just frame him up and make it all go away, that would save some lives. But there could be more things down the road about the corruption and the lack of justice, which could produce other difficulties down the road. So the question is, what would the moral absolutists have to do, and what would the moral consequentialists have to do? Given such a potential for the corruption of justice, a utilitarian or consequentialist judge or magistrate could, on good utilitarian or consequentialist grounds, argue that it was morally wrong to frame an innocent man. If the mob must rampage, if a sacrificial lamb is not provided, then the mob must rampage. Must a utilitarian or consequentialist come to such a conclusion? The answer is no. It is the conclusion which is, as things stand, the most reasonable conclusion, but that he must come to it is far too strong a claim. A consequentialist could consistently argue that, in taking the above tough-minded utilitarian position, we have overestimated the corrupting effects. In short of it is the short of it is that the utilitarians could disagree, as other consequentialists could disagree, about what is morally required of us in that case. So, when it comes to framing guy, given there would be, given any moral absolutist theory, normative theory about what one should do, there would be institutions within that moral theory about justice, about rightness, because it obviously isn't right or morally acceptable to frame the guy because he didn't do it. That is injustice. Must the consequentialist have the belief that we have to keep on going with the trial and let the mob keep on rampaging? The answer is no. The fact that he must do this or that is too strong, because it would be based on a grade of moral acceptability or moral reasonableness, and it's like a moral reasoning process of going through which action, which thing, either framing the innocent guy or going through the long process of finding the guy who did it. Going through all that with the moral reasoning process and figuring out which of those actions leads to the least amount of suffering and death and harm, and the most amount of happiness and all that stuff. It's not saying that one must do this is not really. Again, the point here is that framing a guy who is innocent might be the better thing to do. It might lead to the more desirable consequences. Let's see here. The most crucial thing to recognize is that to regard such judicial bowing to such a threatening mob as unqualifiedly wrong, as morally intolerable, one need not reject utilitarianism except some form of theistic or deontological absolutism. So, the fat man. I'm just going over this briefly in order to get through it and just show that, given things that are typically would be morally unacceptable, they would not always, in any circumstance whatsoever, always be wrong or more wrong than something else. The innocent fat man. Consider the story of the fat man stuck in the mouth of a cave on a coast. He was leading a group of people out of the cave when he got stuck in the mouth of the cave, and in a very short time the high tide will be upon them, and unless he is promptly unstuck, they will all be drowned except for the fat man, whose head is out of the cave. But unfortunately, or fortunately, someone has with him a stick of dynamite. The short of the matter is, either they use it and blast the poor innocent fat man out, or everyone else drowns. Either one life or many lives. And this is like the thing with typically any moral absolutist theory. You're going to have the thing in there that the death of any innocent person is never morally justifiable. It's never morally tolerable. Killing somebody who is innocent, and sometimes even killing anybody, innocent or not, is never morally acceptable. And the truth is, you have two things here. You have something that is monstrous, and then you have something that is more monstrous. Do you want to have one person die, or many people die? And he goes through things about, it's been given that, blowing the fat man out of the cave is like saying that people are a means to an end, or that people aren't respected or whatever. He states that it's something that people go through. It's like a long moral reasoning process, and so you go through all the options until all of them are exhausted. And you wouldn't blow the fat man out unless that was the last thing that you could possibly do. And I think he makes a really good case against moral absolutism and conservatism here, because I don't think that any moral obligation or principle is morally, it's not able to be universalized. You can't pick even a principle like you must not kill any person morally universalizable. You can't do that, because there is always going to be a certain case where killing somebody who is innocent is more morally acceptable and more morally right than something else. Given you have two options, you have to pick one or the other. And he does go through that more. He does go through different things here, and he comes to the conclusion that not only is consequentialism not it. He kind of takes objections to consequentialism and says, well, consequentialism can't lead to horrible things done by an agent. It can't lead to horrible things done by anybody, really, and that it's quite possible that, given a moral absolutist theory, that you could lead to something very more monstrous by adhering to some principle which is not necessarily there's no real reason to even hold it. And I think it's kind of a very valid and sound argument. Personally, I have problems with any kind of moral theory that says that given a certain action, there's a certain effective consequence. Because because that isn't always the case, and there's lots of different states of affairs that one has no knowledge of that could factor into it when you have no knowledge of it, so you can't make a informed decision. And I plan to make a video on that soon, and I have a little bit already, but given what he says here, I would say that this kind of shows that a moral conservative theory or moral absolute theory would come to very much difficulties, because you can't just take any set of moral obligations and universalize it and have it work, because there's always going to be something else that that will conflict with. There will be some certain case that will make adhering to that more morally wrong. For instance, by Kant's theory, by Kant's categorical imperative, you can never lie on any case ever. There's no circumstance on which you can ever lie. And I think that there are circumstances in which lying is morally right. It's morally correct, because it's having respect for the. It's basically out of respect for people that you don't always tell them the truth. It's often for the better good of people that they don't know the full truth. But anyway, and I highly recommend this to be read. And he kind of says that, he also goes on like a negative responsibility, that what you do, you have consequences for, and what you don't do, there are also consequences for. Did I miss anything? And it's also an act utilitarianism, because it's judging. It's kind of figuring out what's right based on the way people act. Anti-consequentialists often point to the inhumanity of people who will sanction such killing of the innocent, but cannot the compliment be returned by speaking of the even greater inhumanity conjoined with evasiveness of those who will allow even more death and far greater misery, and then excuse themselves on the ground that they did not intend the death and misery, but merely forbore to prevent it. And the truth is, I think, given the magistrate, you would have to figure out which one. I mean, with the magistrate, that's a little more complicated. You would have to figure out various causes and effects within each action. And my stance on that is that you really can't figure out the effect of every action of every action that you do. But with the innocent fat man, if all other options are exhausted, and you have no other option but to blow him out of the cave to save everyone else, I would think that it is more morally correct to blow him out, because and again, it's not out of disrespect for humanity or treating humanity as a means, but it's just this is the last possible thing that we could do. If you have any questions, comments below. If you want to talk about this, I'm definitely open. Whenever someone comments, I get a email. Thanks.